afternoon, everybody. It's Kalini Kent here, and I've got in the studio with me today the most amazing gentleman, Dr. Mark Deeks, who is going to be helping me to discuss and explore all the implications of men's mental health awareness. We've also got some other guests joining us who will be able to give their input and their thoughts and views about the current crisis, actually, I would say, that's facing men, because there is so much stigma attached to men actually admitting that they need support, they need help. There are so many statistics I could quote you, which all about the challenges they face. For example, 12.5%, 1 in 8 men have a common mental health condition, yet it's not often talked about. Suicide is probably one of the most common causes of death for men under 50. And 3 times more men are likely to die by suicide in England than women. So it is something that does need to be discussed, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So I would like to welcome our wonderful guest, Mark Deeks. Mark, there is so much about you which we have discussed: your musical capabilities, you're a musician, a performer, you're a teacher, but also you're a TEDx speaker, professional speaker, aren't you? And there are some topics which I don't want to steal your thunder, I'm going to let you tell us about. So first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so ostensibly, to all intents and purposes, I'm a musician who's become a speaker. I've spent my entire life on stage. So I was teaching piano when I was 15, but I was playing in concerts like a kid before that. Played piano since I was 5. And life has led me to a pretty varied career. So one side of my life is 25 plus years running community choirs with up to 300 singers at once. That's been a multiple times a week thing for the last 25 years. I did 8 years as a college lecturer running a music department, so that involved, leading people through musical stories and teaching as well. And then the other side of my life being in 2 signed metal bands and touring around playing metal shows for a very different audience often. And now in the last couple of years, working as a speaker as well since my TEDx in 2023, as you mentioned. So the thread that's through all of it is a passion for how music makes us feel, and the role that music can play, as well as being just entertainment and background noise. I think that music is the most underutilized wellbeing tool we have, and I think it's hiding in plain sight, and I think we've forgotten its power.
And I totally resonate with all that you say, because it's something which is close to my heart, because I'm from a performance background too, not just on music, but also in acting and performance and theatre. But so do you want to tell me how you feel that it benefits people?
I think that you just have to ask people to think of a song that they love that reminds them of someone they love. And most people have songs that are attached to memories. And usually when you say to someone, think of a song that reminds you of someone you love, their facial expression changes. And that's because it becomes a very deep part of who we are without even realizing it. So if you start to think about the significant memories of your life in terms of birthdays, weddings, funerals, and other major life events like that, music will usually play a role in that. But then you start to go a little bit deeper and you start to talk about the songs that your parents or grandparents used to sing you, the first gig that you went to, the first record that you remember buying, the dance routines you used to make up in your bedroom when you were a kid, daft karaoke stories, driving to the airport with songs on the radio and everyone singing in the car. We remember these stories, and they become part of who we are. And sometimes I'm in schools and I will say I remember at school last year where I said to hundreds of 6 and 7 year olds, can you think of a time where you were on holiday or out for the day where music was part of the memory? And 80% of the kids put their hands in the air. And they could just reel off who was there, what the weather was like, what the song was, what their auntie was doing, or whatever. And I said to them, look, you don't realize it right now, but you're still going to remember that in 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. It's become part of who you are already. Mm. And then when we start filtering that through major life events, as I say, music is like the soundtrack to our life. And it's a cliche, but it's true. It's the memory mark of our lives. It sort of pot marks our history. Mm. And I used to do an awful lot of playing at like weddings and corporate events, and I used to say to people like, I know you're currently stressing over the colour of the ribbon on the cake, but nobody is going to remember the color of the ribbon on the cake. But everybody is going to remember whether the music made them smile and whether the food tasted good. They're the only two things that people are going to remember. So I think that music is a powerful tool that once upon a time people used to interact with much more intentionally than we do now. Now it tends to be the background while we live life on top of it.
Yeah.
And so my mission, amongst other things, is to try and get people to reconnect with music in a much more intentional way.
And I've really, all of that, there's so much I'd love to say about that, because I think it is very evocative, isn't it? I mean, I'm passionate about storytelling, and I think music is like a story, isn't it? Not only the lyrics that you hear within the story, but it's sort of like, it's like that Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said, what you did, but they'll always remember how it made you feel. Music really gives you that feeling, doesn't it? And that's
absolutely.
That's why you do meditation music, etc., because it sets you in an emotion, doesn't it?
Yeah, but when we start to get into the notion of meditation music, I personally have a slight problem with that concept. So because I don't believe there's such a thing as meditation music or relaxing music or background music. Like, any music can fulfill any of those criteria. So I would always get an email that says, we thought it would be nice to have some nice relaxing music at our wedding. And I would say, what's relaxing music?
Yeah.
Because what relaxes you doesn't relax me, and vice versa. It's an individual reaction.
Absolutely.
And so some of the stuff that I kind of poke the bear at a little bit in my keynotes and stuff is that, look, here are some examples of some research where people are trying to find patterns about this kind of music is relaxing, this kind of music is uplifting, this kind of music will make you sleep, or this kind of music will bring focus, and so on. And none of the statistics ever say 100% of people were relaxed by this.
No.
They say 75% of people were relaxed by this, or 60% of people were relaxed by this. I'm like, great, if you're the 75, crack on. But if you're the 25, now what? So I think that we have to be careful sometimes about generalizing reactions. I always say that we accept that people like different kinds of food. And then when it comes to music and other arts, we start saying this is what relaxing music is. And I think that we can't be as grand as that. So one of the statistics from the International Stress Management Association that I was tagged in a post on a LinkedIn last year was that if you want to relax using music, you should choose music known for their calming effects, such as classical, jazz, and ambient. Now, if you're relaxed by jazz, great. Jazz makes me want to go on a rampage. It just does not. It has the opposite effect for me. Whereas Iron Maiden makes you just want to relax and put a smile on my face. So I know I'm not the only person that is the case for. I might be in the minority, but that doesn't mean to say we should dismiss it. So yeah, I kind of poke the bear a bit because I've been into rock music since I was a teenager. I've had 30 years of defending the corner of rock music that it's not just noise and it's not going to make us violent and rob old ladies. So I kind of have the smile on my face when I say these things. But we have to be careful with using some generalizing language, I think.
I totally resonate with that as well, because I think it's like, and also the other thing is you touched on as well, is that how we're wired for stories, but we're also wired for music, aren't we? When we were born, we come out the womb, we actually listened to music. People were sung lullabies, they were sung songs, etc. And it really, do you also believe that it actually it's sort of, do we choose our music, or does the music choose us?
Oh, deep.
Yes.
I mean, it's Wednesday lunchtime. I honestly don't know. I mean, it's the whole nature or nurture argument, isn't it? So, I mean, neither of my parents like rock music, but I stumbled upon it, and when I was a teenager, and here I am 30 years later, in the phase that my parents probably hope will end one day. But I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember that my wife sang to our daughter when she was, still in the belly, somewhere over the rainbow, and then when she was born and she was crying, my wife would sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it was, instant crying stop. So there's all kinds of stories that I'm probably sure people watching and listening can think of in their own lives. But it's interesting that you mentioned sort of the stories and the lyrical aspect, because again, that's not a thing for everyone. No. Some people couldn't give two hoots what the lyrics are, and some people get obsessed by what the lyrics are. I remember when I was at university, one of my roommates was an English literature student, and we would have these sort of impassioned late night debates as to the importance of lyrics in music. And he would get super defensive about the notion that anyone could possibly enjoy a song without caring what the lyrics are. And I would get super impassioned that I just didn't care what the lyrics were. because to me the voice was just another instrument, and it was the sound it made and the emotion it was conveying, and I didn't it wasn't the priority for me. And so most of my favorite music, couldn't tell you what the lyrics are. I've got no idea. I struggle to remember the lyrics of the songs I wrote, never mind anyone else's. So we all have individual priorities and individual tastes and individual reactions and emotions when we hear different kinds of music. And so it's a fascinating subject. What I've often said, one of the most fascinating things about music is two people can ferociously agree on 100 bands and ferociously disagree on the 101st for no apparent reason. And it's just life, isn't it? It's just the randomness of life, and it's interesting.
Yeah. So we're here to talk also about mental health and mental well-being, and particularly men's mental health. But you also touched earlier on about children, and you've obviously had quite a challenging time, haven't you, yourself and your wife? Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that in your words? What's actually happened?
So, I mean, it's a subject that I guess comes with a trigger warning, but it's a subject that I think, the most difficult conversations are the ones most important important to have. So we had been married for 4 years or so, and we went to the 20-week scan of our first child. We didn't want to know the gender. It was an unknown to us. And the first 15 minutes or so of the 20-week scan went perfectly, and then the woman stopped talking and still stopped talking, and it went very quiet. And obviously you start panicking in that situation. And yeah, we got the news that every new parent dreads. Our daughter had 2 terminal conditions, one of which was dangerous to Angela, my wife, as well. And we were immediately thrust into this subsection of the baby loss community known as a termination for medical reasons, which is something you'd never heard of at the time, and no one has heard of unless they've been through it usually. And it's a situation where it is recommended that you probably should terminate the pregnancy, but legally it's your call. And that's a very difficult place to be in. And you have to make the decision very quickly, particularly at that stage, because of the legalities that change when you get to 22 weeks. So at 21 weeks and 5 days, we lost who we discovered to be our daughter, who we named Laurie. And that was about 10 days before the first UK lockdown of 2020. So then we were dealing with everything that came with the mental health challenges of that on our own, rattling around the house. And you think that you've grieved, you think that you've had, obviously the support that we had access to was limited in the situation that we're in. And you think that you've dealt with it. And then as the months went on, I unraveled quite quickly. It was sort of, I say quite quickly, sort of a delayed reaction. It wasn't until 4, 5, 6 months later that it really started to affect me. I'd had periods of what I called lowness before that. In previous years, I would sort of say I never really called it depression, although I guess it probably was. It was intermittent. It was occasional. It could only be a few hours or a day or two, never really significantly affected my life. It would just go away of its own accord without a huge problem. But yeah, things got much worse in the months after that. I was having panic attacks and huge anxiety, and I've kind of realized in subsequent years that I've always been a pretty anxiety-driven person. I would still say I suffer from anxiety, if that's the right expression. But I realized that this awful thing that had happened to us, I couldn't really face the awful thing being in isolation. I needed to try and make something positive come of it. So at the time, there was several things going on. So music, as it always does for me, played a significant role. So firstly, when we found out we were losing Laurie, the song that happened to be playing in the background in the hospital reception was the song that was our first dance from our wedding, which was Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship. And suddenly the song that was the happiest memory of our lives was now the worst moment of our lives. Yeah. And that was a really difficult place to be for someone. And my wife was also obsessed by music. So that was a really difficult thing to deal with. And then in the subsequent months, I was writing an album for my solo project called Arth, which is an old Northumbrian word which means my native land. And my passion is how musicians represent where they're from. My PhD, which I regularly say is in heavy metal, which is true. The full title is National Identity in Northern and Eastern European Heavy Metal. So it's about how musicians in Europe represent where they're from in their music. In my case, through rock and metal music. And my Arth project is all about Northumbrian history. All the lyrics are tales from Northumbrian history and mythology and, pagan battles and kings and Christians and 6th and 7th century stuff and kind of niche of niche. And I didn't want to write lyrics about what I was going through because that would have felt really crass, but I knew I needed to use music to somehow process what I was going through. So my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law had a star named after Laurie as a gift, as a surprise, and this ornate star chart arrived in the post, and showing the coordinates of where Laurie Deeks' star is, the Laurie Deeks star in the Andromeda system. And obviously this was really moving. And the coordinates of that star are the numbers that are on my tattoo on my arm. So I call this my heart.
Can we see you?
Yeah, like that. So that's Laurie's star and a bind rune, which has some sort of meaning behind the Anglo-Saxon runes. So I was really struggling with what I was going through. I suddenly sat up in bed 3 o'clock one morning and thought, what if those numbers weren't star coordinates? What if I pretend they're the numbers of the notes of a musical scale? What does that sound like if I turn it into a melody and just played the star coordinates as a tune? Because I know every scale has 8 notes in it. Well, not every scale. My music theory geek side kicked in there, sorry. But a lot of main scales had to have 8 notes in them. So I just played it as if it was a melody. And that melody went on the end of the first Arth album, where the song is about St. Cuthbert from the 7th century. So unless you know it's there, you have no idea it's there because the words don't tell you it's there. And that record sold about 3,000 copies now.
Wow.
And most Arth fans have absolutely no idea that melody is what it is. But that doesn't matter to me. I quite like the fact that it's hiding in plain sight.
Oh my gosh.
So the coordinate, on the album artwork, in the credits, it says in memory of Laurie Deeks, and then just the numbers underneath. But there's no other indication that it's there.
Can you play it first, Mark? Can you play it first? Because I know you can.
I can, yeah.
I mean, this is just so incredible.
So this is so in our house, this is known as Laurie's theme, and to the rest of the world, it's a song called "Only Three Shall Know" about St. Cuthbert's remains.
Wow, that's got me quite emotional. I don't know about anybody else here.
So that's Laurie's theme on record. I mean, on record it's played by guitars, and then at the end, it's the last song of the album. It's the last melody you hear. It's fading away on piano at the end of it. And obviously, when we play that song live, as I've had the fortune to do on a number of occasions, it's super challenging. It's you have to sort of deal with the fact it's not very metal to cry on stage.
No.
So and obviously everyone will be like, "Why are you crying playing this metal song about St. Cuthbert?" But yeah, it's always a big moment when we do that live, and but it means a lot to me. That was kind of my own sort of musical therapy. And I always say to people, you don't need to be able to turn star coordinates into a melody to use music to heal.
Yeah.
It's just about connecting with the songs and the music that means the most to you, and reminding yourself of how they remind you of what it means to you and the people who are closest to you. So in the time that's followed since that, the other crazy musical thing that happened with it was that, so I ran the Great North Run for one of the baby loss charities that had supported us in aid of them, and I'm no runner, I'm no natural athlete whatsoever, so that's a real slog. And because when I do run, I hate running without music. I just need something to distract me from the suffering that's going on. But I also dislike the concept of shuffle very much. I don't like shuffling any kind of music. I want to be in control of the music I listen to. I don't like any algorithm deciding what music I'm going to hear that day. But on this occasion, because I was running this race on my own, because my wife, bless her, so we now have a 3-year-old daughter, gratefully. But my wife had a really traumatic birth, having our 3-year-old, and so she wasn't allowed to run for a period of time. So she couldn't run the Great North Run in aid of the baby loss charity with me. So I ran it on my own. And I created this 6-hour playlist of music that I love, knowing that was way more than I would need. I would just need like 2.5 hours or something. And I put the song with that melody in the playlist and just kind of forgot about it and pressed shuffle on the start line. And I got about 100 yards from the end, and I was absolutely out on my feet. And on came Laurie's theme in my ears. And I was like, "You've got to be kidding!" And I was just in bits getting to the finish line, physically and emotionally, and sort of stumbled over the finish line, sobbing my heart out, unable to explain to anyone around me why I was in the wreck. So yeah, music just keeps sort of popping its head through the surface, kind of thing. So yeah, music is a really important thing, and that's kind of all led on to now me
what you're doing now.
Being a speaker now and being sort of the mission behind it, because I think nobody talks about baby loss.
No.
And yet we all know people who've lost children. And when you go to baby loss events, you hear people read out the names of 5 children. I mean, brutal losses. To go through that multiple times. We know how bad it was once.
Yeah.
And nobody speaks about it, and men certainly never speak about it.
So can we talk about the mental health side of things a bit more? You know, obviously it happened during lockdown, which mustn't have helped, because you, as you said, you were isolated, weren't you? You weren't able to sort of mix and get into these groups and talk to people.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you, particularly with yourself and your wife? And I mean, because did you have like a little bubble of people that you were able to be with? I mean,
no one did at first, right? It was just in the house. So ever endless dog walks were us. So yeah, no, it was difficult. I mean, my wife's industry's completely shut down, like a lot of industries did, and so it was on me to try and keep the money rolling. I'm a musician, so you can imagine what had happened to my income. And I was thankfully I'd done quite a lot of stuff online and already pre-pandemic with my piano coaching. So I was pivoting all the choirs I run to being online. You can imagine what it was like trying to get 100 old people to sing on a Zoom call who'd never seen I don't say that facetiously. A lot of community choirs attract older people, right? So, that was technologically a delight. But we kept them going during the pandemic because I believe that music is important in the face of adversity, right? So lots of community groups and community choirs especially just shut down and said, "We'll see you when this is over." And I was like, over my dead body, like we need to keep this going. And so I've had countless people say that was the thing that kept them going during the pandemic.
I did a group going for my young people for months, and we just used to have quiz nights and things online.
Absolutely. And it was super powerful, super powerful. So yeah, it was difficult. It was around the time of a social media platform called Clubhouse, which was audio only. And that was a lifeline because I could just talk about what I was going through. And there was, for those of you who don't know, it was like a sort of halfway house between a radio show and a podcast. And there were loads of mental health rooms going on. And so I was forever speaking in my club on Clubhouse was called Music and Mental Health. And so talking about what we're going through was really important. And the reaction was, we don't hear men speak about these things. It's really refreshing to hear a man talk about this stuff. And I'd get random messages from blokes in America going, "I'm going through a termination for medical reasons now," and like, thank you for somebody saying it, because most people don't even know this is a thing,
So can we talk about the stigmas then? Because it is, you've mentioned a few times, your ability to cry about things. But did you find that you yourself were also holding back on what you could share at the time? You're obviously able to talk about it much more easily now, but at the time, were you struggling with that?
I think at first when you speak about this stuff, so one of the biggest problems we found in this sort of subsection of the community life we found ourselves in is that the language can be really clunky and the terminology can be really clunky, and nobody knows how to, what do you say to someone who says, "I've lost a child"? I mean, it's just nobody has the right response to that.
No.
So, and then you don't know what to say, and then you sort of stare at each other awkwardly until someone says, "But it's sunny today," or "Shame about the rain," or something. So until the conversation moves on. It's a really awkward thing to talk about. And you become painfully aware of the clunkiness of things like, how many kids have you got? Is this your first child?
Yeah.
Like now we've got a 3-year-old. One of the worst questions you can ask me is, how many kids have you got?
Yeah.
And yet it's such an everyday question. Yeah. So you then you then filter in the awkwardness and difficulty of the loaded emotion of the word termination.
Yeah.
Because everyone has an opinion on whether that should be a thing. Everyone has an opinion. Like political views start coming in, religious views start coming in. Should you talk about that publicly? Am I seen to be profiting from speaking about what I went through because I now get paid to speak about it. That's a thing. I know we had some people who just essentially fell out with us because we were being too open about it. We had an instance where we did an interview on a TFMR podcast, which only talks about people who talk about these, only talks to couples who've been through that thing. And some Channel 4 documentary makers asked us to contribute to a documentary that was being made, but didn't tell us what it was going to be called. They presented it as, we did a pre-interview for them where they presented it as it was going to be a chance for parents who've gone through TFMRs to talk about it and finally sort of explain what it's like to go through. And what they didn't tell was the name of the program was going to be something like Abortion, Right or Wrong.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because there was some high court case going on at the time. And what it actually was, they were just shamelessly harvesting people to talk about abortion. Well, you can imagine how that was going to go down in my family.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a really difficult area to speak about. And you know, what I often found people say, I say to people is that some of the stuff should be terminology that's reserved for a hospital database. I don't want to hear my child described as it is described. So, like, this is trigger warning number 2. Yeah. But my child, Laurie, is described as a fetal abnormality.
Oh, God,
and that's even the term that gets used by one of the baby loss charities on their promotional banners.
Yeah.
You know, we support people who've gone through that. I don't want to hear my child. Nobody wants to hear their child described like that. Certainly not on a roller banner.
No. And I think
on the back of their hoodies. I mean, it's just wild to me. So why is the terminology so awkward and clunky and medical when we're talking about the deepest of emotive subjects?
And I think what you're touching on as well is, I think you've touched on a couple of things there, which is sometimes when you are not part of it, your experience, people do struggle with what to say.
Yeah, but I'm here to say so do we.
Yeah, I know.
And you know, whether we're talking about it, so sometimes I talk to businesses about your HR kind of related sort of grief issues and grief leave and this kind of stuff, and just being conscious of the fact that this is every bit as much of a grief. It's not grief top trumps, by the way, but this is every bit as much of a grief as someone losing a partner or a parent or anything.
Yes.
This is absolutely raw grief and a pain like you'll never know.
Yeah.
And we need to recognise it as such and just be a little bit more caring about. That is not a pain that ever goes away. You just deal with it like you would any other loss of a grandparent or something. It's just another form of grief. But it's kind of so unspoken that people are just expected to crack on.
And I really respect that you are talking about this, because I think you're bringing up a topic which I think people overlook it, as you've highlighted for us. People overlook it. They think, you know, it's a baby that's not yet born, but it is still a person in my eyes. And I mean, we go with the decision that was made last night. It's quite timely, this conversation following that. But so going back to how you felt, you've obviously been able to talk about it with the community of similar parents who've gone through a similar thing. Do they struggle with discussing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all the cliches. So the women look awkward and the men look worse. The men are just shuffling awkwardly behind their partners. And there was like even a meme, like something on the internet, like a sketch, a comedy sketch. I'm taking my awkward man for a walk. It was like some kind of comedy sketch. 2 women in a park going for a walk, start talking, and their men are stood awkwardly 2 paces behind them, not knowing what to say and not knowing how to integrate themselves into the conversation. It's that en masse. And it's all of the cliches. I mean, obviously, granted, like I'm generalizing, but you know what I mean? Yeah. There is definitely an air of, even within that community, no one really, we kind of support each other. And yet, and we can, I think sometimes, it sounds awful to say it, but sometimes there is, I use the term grief top trumps. That sometimes definitely plays a part because, you know, because we talk about pregnancies in weeks, like how far you've got into that is somehow seen to make it worse.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if it was, you know, only 10 weeks or only 20. Oh, I went 28 weeks. like it makes any difference how we got to the end result.
Mm.
So it's really something that I feel really passionate about and always will. That there's an international event every October called the Wave of Light, and the Wave of Light is basically one day a year where at 7 p.m. in every time zone across the world, people gather to remember children that have been lost. And so this, once an hour across the world, these little events happen, and they're super simple. They are, candlelight, read a few poems, read the names of the children who've been lost out loud. That it lasts 20 minutes, half an hour. It's unbelievably emotional, even when you know what's coming. The gut-wrenching feeling of standing in that circle is extraordinary. And when they read the children out, some families are 2, 3, 4, 5 names being read out, and it's happening to so many. You replicate that couple of hundred people in North Tyneside out across the world. I know my mum had 3 miscarriages, 2 before me and 1 after, and I know it's defined her in some ways. Like she still carries it now in her 70s, the pain of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that for us. So the way I'm dealing with it is I need to talk about it. And if that's seen to be profiting or gaining or being too open, I've had people say you shouldn't talk about it so much. You can imagine I'd probably just give them the proverbial.
I feel very
middle
sorry that that's happened to you. I'm so
like it happens all of the time. And I'm just kind of immune to it at this point. It angers me in some ways, depends on what day you catch me on.
Yeah.
But I've had like a close friend say like we should stop, coying to Mark, like this sort of sympathy kind of situation. Like you just crack on with life. No, I'm not going to do that.
And I think it's important to recognise as well. I really respect you talking about it, because I think it needs to be continued to be talked about, because if nobody else is talking about it, how do we raise awareness about the fact that people are going through this? Because
exactly.
I've learned things today which I didn't know, and yet I'm quite aware of a lot of stuff, and I'm sure all of us have learned something today. But the other thing as well is that time is so personal to everybody. It's not like just because it was 3 years ago, it's going to be any easier 10 years ago. And this is where I think people forget that, we're all in a personal situation. My father I lost 22 years ago.
Yeah, it's like anything, it's a personal thing, and like we often hear people say, again, cliches are cliches because they're true. It catches you at the most inopportune moments.
Yeah.
I could just be randomly walking the dog and glance at the sea, and you're away for 5 minutes, and it just catches you. And strange things like, again, coming back to this concept of whether terminology is useful or clunky. So we lost Laurie on the 4th of March.
Yeah.
Is the 4th of March her birthday, or an anniversary, or a memorial?
Oh gosh, yeah.
No idea.
Really?
And I literally call it a different thing to my wife, because we process it in different ways.
To you then, Mark?
So I call it the anniversary of losing Laurie.
Okay.
Whereas Angela treats it as her birthday.
Yeah.
And so we literally have a birthday cake, and so we go to every year we go to the beach where we live. We write her name on a stone, and we lie in the water and let the wave take it away. And that's what we do. And that's our sort of simple sort of ceremony. And come home and light a candle and probably have a large whiskey. And it's you kind of have to deal with it in your own way. But I remember that now that Nola, our daughter, is 3, the first year we took Nola to do that was one of the most collision of emotions I've ever experienced, because we know that had we not lost Laurie, Nola would almost certainly not exist. And so therefore you're then faced with this, like, well, obviously Nola is our absolute center of our universe, but you wouldn't be here if this hadn't happened. Is that a sad thing or is it a happy thing? Like, it's just wild collision of emotions. So it always catches you in unexpected ways, and you just have to ride it out.
And have you ever put any words to the music?
I mean, yeah, but they're all about St. Cuthbert. Yeah, I don't want to sing about it.
No. We won't ask you to sing it then.
But the melody's there. That's enough.
Yeah. Have you any guidance or thoughts for anybody who's listening to this? having gone through what you've gone through?
I mean, all I can say is like the kind of stuff I'm talking about, to just be a bit more conscious of how you phrase questions around people's kids.
Yeah.
Because it's almost certain, because these things are so buried. Like we used to not talk about menopause, or we not talk about suicide. Those are the two sort of big things that particularly have become part of much more open discussion in the last few years, which is obviously, I would say, a great thing. We try to, for example, change the language around not using the expression committed suicide, because that suggests it's a crime, because it historically was a crime, and now we tend to try and get people to say died by suicide or something similar. Mm-hmm. Just thinking about because no one speaks about baby loss, the question, do you have any kids? Or how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
Is such a difficult situation to be in, because you don't know how to answer it, and no matter which one you choose, you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because if I say I've got 2 kids, then the person goes, how old are they?
Yeah.
And if I say I've got 1 kid, I've just pretended Laurie didn't exist.
Yeah.
And neither of those things are a great place to be in. I don't want to make me feel awful, but I also don't want to make the other person feel awful. It's not like we're here to upset people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that will never be a simple question to answer. And yet, how often is that one of the first 3 questions that someone asks you at a networking event?
I mean, I think for everybody listening, I think that's such a powerful awareness to have.
Well, I genuinely feel like I need to make something positive come of it. And I feel like, whilst my overarching umbrella is the connection between music and well-being and music and mental health, and I will speak at many events and not talk about the detail of some of the stuff I've shared with you here, although I do always tell the story, at least on a surface level. I just think if we don't talk about these things, we're not making any progress. We're just pretending it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wouldn't know how many people are losing children every year, but standing in an event with 100 people or 200 people and finding that they between them have probably lost 100 kids, it's wild.
Mm. And how do you feel that the media handles or society handles the situation? Do you feel there's support, or can more be done to actually raise awareness?
I mean, I genuinely disconnected from most mainstream media over the years. I have not watched the news in almost 5 years. I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, when I'm the person who, when there's a budget and people say, "What do you think of the budget?" I'm like, I don't know who the Chancellor is. I have no interest in it, because someone will be taking my money off me for something. So whoever that person is and whatever the money they're taking off me for, I'll just live with it. So I'm probably not the person to talk about how the media talks about this, other than the example I told you about the documentary makers trying to sort of hijack our suffering. Absolutely. But I think that when you hear, I mean, I know that you mentioned that there'd been some decision last night. I mean, I honestly had no idea any kind of vote was taking place, and I'm that close to it. I do confess I looked on some BBC News website for 5 minutes and thought, this is just going to make me angry, so I'm just going to not get involved. So my feelings are that I know that there is great so I come from a very religious family, and yet I'm an atheist. And I think that political views and spiritual views tend to be 2 things that we try not to get involved in on social media, right? Because we all know that the rabbit hole of that argument is never going to do anyone any good. So when you then throw in something as emotive as losing a child, I saw some people share some stuff last night about law change. Yeah. And I get that people are going to have views on it. Mm-hmm. But just think, somebody reading that might be in my position. Yeah. And whether you're right or wrong, and whether your opinion's right or wrong, and whether I agree with you or not, is all, I think, secondary to, but some people have lost children who didn't want to. Yeah. So just be a little bit kinder. You know. Well, let's come back to that. Be a bit kinder, right? It's
all about the values, isn't it? We've talked about, isn't it, the importance of kindness and compassion, and just putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is, because no one speaks about it, no one is sort of thinking of they need to be aware of that the ramifications, the ripple effects of that discussion.
And you've mentioned that you're in this community, and when, like, the men don't, the women maybe are more expressive and the men don't speak. Is this, again, going back to the deeper question of is it about this stoicism about men, the expectations of men that they have got to be strong, they've got to be put on this persona of having it all together and not be, you're not being weak?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to the kind of, I guess, the stereotypes of, as you say, there is an expectation, for rightly and wrong, cultures change and have moved on. But the classic sort of caveman mentality, I will be strong, I will protect my woman, I will help, I will be there for her. And you can do as much as you can, but there is absolutely no more helpless feeling.
Yeah.
I can do, in reality, absolutely nothing. The old kind of thing about stressing about things that are in and out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
I can affect this situation not one bit.
That's right.
And by the way, PAL is a thing, pregnancy after loss.
Yeah.
So when you then become pregnant after having gone through that, that is a whole new level of stress. Because you're trying to, everyone gets stressed about a pregnancy, right? When you go through a pregnancy, and even if it's a perfect pregnancy in every way, you think about how long you're worrying about every last bump and scrape and every last scan and doctor's appointment. Oh, is it going to be all right? Is it going to be all right? Pregnancy after loss is a whole different subject.
It was something I wanted to touch on, actually, Mark, before we finish, because you've obviously now got a beautiful daughter, 3-year-old, but I bet you that pregnancy must have been quite challenging.
Yeah, throwing COVID vaccinations and masks. That was a whole ride. So one of the things that will always live with me is the policy guidance on whether a pregnant woman should have a COVID vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
Changed mid-pregnancy for us.
Right.
And it literally went from, I understand why you've not had it, to why have you not it? And she was harassed by the medical professionals. I mean, I realise we're delving into a really dangerous discussion area.
No, that's fine.
For right or wrong, like, I'm not here to judge either way, but you can imagine someone who's pregnant after having had a loss, not knowing what to do for the best in that situation. Was stress levels extreme. And
I bet you went for the scans, that was stress in itself as well.
Yeah, because I was told I wasn't going to be allowed to be in the room because, COVID. And I might not have agreed with that. And I might not have lost that argument.
Okay. You obviously insisted,
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because triggering much for Angela to have to go through a scan on her own in that situation, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems quite bizarre anyway because you're living together. So for you not to be,
let's not go there.
No,
that's a different interview.
That's a totally different conversation. So you're obviously now blessed with a beautiful 3-year-old, and I take it you've sort of that's helped, has it, the situation? But as you say, you're never going to forget what you've gone through with Laurie. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, like any parent, she's the centre of our world, and we dote on her. And I guess you can tell yourself that you appreciate it even more than you would have done. But I mean, that's just a romantic narrative that you create. But it's beautiful, of course, to have her. I feel we got a happy ending, but it's always going to be couched in what we went through, and we make. Nola will refer to Laurie as like her sister in the stars. That's how we think about it for her, and that it's not like we're sat talking about it all the time. But she's aware that sometimes she'll look up and say, "I can see Daddy, I can see Laurie's star," and everything.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's tough.
Well, we were going to do something very different to finish this talk, weren't we?
Absolutely.
So something that I'm quite passionate about. I mean, you've obviously gone through quite a difficult time. Is that I've actually also written. One thing we have got in common. I've written a short musical, and the lyrics and the words. I'm not the musical person. My musical director did the music, but you're an amazing musician, and I've written the lyrics to a song, which has been a poem up to now. And we did say that we would do something slightly different, which is for me to read the poem, and you were going to put it to music.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done this quite a lot of times actually. People think it's a bit of a bizarre niche skill. But yeah, so I don't like to prepare these or know what's coming or anything. I kind of sort of I can improvise for Britain. Like I think I could do that on the piano. So it's much more interesting to not have any preparation. So I haven't got the lyrics in front of me. I haven't got the poem in front of me. And the concept is you're going to read the poem. I'm going to make up something on the piano, and we'll see what happens. So here we are.
I will just so that people can see it, I will just share screen so that you can all see that's the poem. So it's actually sort of, I wrote it with a sort of like choruses, etc. And it is the story and the journey of somebody who's going through bullying, different type forms of bullying, because I've written an anti-bullying program. I work with a lot of people who are bullied, and there are so many harmful effects of bullying. And just to set the scene, it's the fact that, you know, any form of bullying, whether it be physical, emotional, whether it's just by words, deeds, it leaves emotional markers on you and behavioral markers on you, and it affects your well-being, your feelings about yourself. You can start believing it. You feel isolated. There is so many different, you know, leads to anxiety, depression, and young people and other people taking their life in the end. So again, I thought it was really important. We thought this was just something different to do. So so shall I keep it like this and read from here? You can all see it, or shall I just take it off screen and I'll read it to you?
I mean, feel free to leave it on screen. So I'm going to turn my microphone off so you can only hear the piano and it'll sound a little bit better. Okay. So I can't speak from now. Over to you.
Okay. So this is a poem called Why Me? And it's a song about the harmful effects of bullying and the need for kindness. So... why me? Can't you see? All the pain and hurt I'm feeling, all the marks of scars you're leaving. I choose to make a fool of me when I can't change the things you see. I choose to hurt me like you do. I choose the things I can't undo. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness. Warm heart, soft words, soothing every wound. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness, would change everything. No one can see the scars I hide. No one can feel my hurt inside. Screw me up and chop me out. Turn my stomach inside out. Lies and tales you can't undo. No one knows it's really you. Laying me barefoot. Who will know that it's not me? Kindness. Just a little bit of kindness, warm heart, soft words, soothing every wound. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness would change everything. Taunts, insults, jibes, threats, kicks and punches in the chest. Trample me, don't hear my shouts. Hurt no more, I'm walking out. Don't push me till it's too late. Reach inside, you'll see my fate. Now you're playing with my head. God, I wish that I was dead. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness. Warm, hot, soft words, soothing every wound. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness, would change everything. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness. Know my pain, despair, no hope. Now you've pushed me far. Kindness, just a little bit of kindness, would have changed everything.
There we go.
Oh, you got me emotional now then. So interesting. I don't know if anybody else has been bullied, but I went through quite a horrible time. So it's that journey. And gosh, it's got to me now.
My pleasure.
So has anybody else got any thoughts that they want to share whilst we're on?
Mark.
Hello.
Hi there. I was just wondering, you're saying about like the suicide and the changing the way we speak differently now about how they say don't commit suicide. Mm-hmm. Is there something you can champion, or if you are doing, about getting the wording changed around, so with like the people you're involved in that's gone through the same thing, to actually put more words out that you would like to hear and start a movement of changing how things are spoken?
That's a great question. Maybe I should. I kind of I feel like I need to. I don't know where this is going to lead. I think, if the honest answer at the minute, I've recently come across an organisation on LinkedIn called Fertility Matters at Work that I think are a great organisation. They're really trying to champion sort of the change around policy, around parental leave, or compassionate leave, around grief-related subjects. But from their point of view, they're focusing on people who go through failed IVF, stillbirth, miscarriage, termination for medical reasons, and so on. So basically, any way that someone could have lost a child, what should then happen in a workplace as a result of that? And they're trying to make campaigns at what they describe as governmental level and for policies to be changed around that, which I think is obviously hugely significant. So I guess I'm kind of still trying to figure out what my role could be in this. It's obviously something I feel very passionate about. It's something I feel very close to, and I'd love to feel like I had some kind of impact on that level. But perhaps I'm the kind. My natural personality is not one of self-aggrandizing or marketing, so I'm not great at working out how that could be. So I'm absolutely willing and happy to contribute to whatever I could do. I'm not 100% sure on what that looks like yet, but if anyone has any ideas,
Is it worth suggesting in the groups, put it out there and see if you can get some backing, and then all start getting them actually to change their banners, and actually
so hand on heart, I've never had the guts yet to tell the Baby Loss charity that I really find their banners and their hoodies.
You can't be the only one.
No, I mean, I think my problem is that they're such a tiny group of volunteers. They're not even like a proper charity. They're just literally like 5 people in the Northeast. So I'd love to, but you just, again, here we are not wanting to upset anyone, and it's a difficult conversation to have. That please, can you change your roller banner? But
I think that's why, Mark, the whole point of today as well is I just wanted to give you that platform to share, because when I had a one-to-one with you, it was just so incredible.
Thank you.
It's important that we do get this message out there. But I think we've talked today about baby loss. We'll be talking about other situations this week in the other chats, and that's going to be about the pressures of parenting, and that a chap I've interviewed, and that's about fathers' postnatal depression, because again,
I mean, I believe that's a thing.
It's a huge thing. Mark Williams, I've interviewed, and and he was there 36 hours. His wife was in labour, and then the baby was so traumatized, and so in the end they just literally in front of him cut her open, whipped the baby out. He went into PTSD, but they didn't recognize, and everybody at the time the focus was on the mother, the baby, and the well-being of them. And so it was weeks on, and he was really not in a good way. So we've now managed to highlight that there's now a father's postnatal depression society. There's a day mark for it. So I think it is something that we can do, and I'd love to help you give a voice to it.
Thank you. I mean, I mentioned that Nola was a difficult birth. Yeah, I've experienced that one as well.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult thing to talk about, but I'm absolutely here to contribute however I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. It's been a fabulous conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
And unless anybody else has got something they wish to say, thank you for the gift of you playing that music to that poem.
You're very welcome.
And I would love to. We're going to be sharing this. Let me just stop the recording. But thank you very much indeed. Let me just